guys, I finally have the Galaxy A54 review for you. I've had this phone for quite some time, but I haven't really had the time to actually make a review recently, so I'm finally getting back to it. If you haven't already watched my Galaxy A34 review, then I'd recommend watching that. It pretty much compares these phones a little bit, and in general, my sentiment is just that the A34 is a much better deal for a cheaper price. So when this phone first came out, it was $450 MSRP, but now just looking on Amazon today, I could get it for $295, roughly, plus or minus a couple dollars depending on your color. Whereas the A34 I was able to get for $200, and personally to me, that difference of almost $100, even if they're the same price, I probably would have gone with the A34 anyways. But let's just get into the review a little bit. We'll start with the design. So this has Gorilla Glass 5 on both the front and the back. It's got the 3 camera setup that Samsung seems to be known for now. Obviously this isn't the same as the flagship ones. We've got a macro, or a depth, I can't remember, an ultra wide, and a just a regular 50 megapixel camera, then the flashlight obviously. Then around the side we have a plastic frame. I don't know if you can see, but mine has a couple scuffs because the guy I brought it from didn't take the best care of it. On the right side of the phone we have volume up, volume down, then the power button. On the top of the phone we have a SIM card slot tray, which also has an expandable micro SD slot. On the bottom we have a down-firing speaker, and then 2 microphones and the USB-C port. At the top we have the headphone grill, which also functions as a hybrid dual audio speaker setup. So overall, pretty good design there. We also have a under fingerprint screen reader, under screen fingerprint reader that is pretty reactive and works quite well. The haptics on this phone are decent enough. They're nothing like you'd find on a flagship or even another mid-range phone like the Pixel 7 or the Pixel 7a, but they're passable, so can't really complain too much there. The screen on this phone is one of the highlights. It's a full HD screen that supports 120 Hz refresh rate, and most important to me, it's also OLED, which makes the viewing experience of pretty much anything really nice. So I really like the screen on this phone. Another thing that pairs nicely with content consumption is the dual speaker setup. While it's not as good as the Galaxy A34, the speakers get pretty loud, and they sound really good. So to me, that's another huge highlight of this phone. It's able to fill up a room whenever I'm watching something. If there's a fan on or there's car noise or anything, I can still hear. So I really like the speakers. On the software front, you get all of your normal Samsung setup that you'd get with the flagship devices. My favorite of which is the little shelf thing that allows you to have a clipboard. I covered this in my A34 review. It's really nice because it lasts longer than an hour, which is what the Gboard clipboard has, and most clipboard apps these days, unless you have root. So I really appreciate that. It's something that I like to use on my PC as well with a different app called Ditto. It just makes it really easy to kind of have something that you might need to copy and paste often, or if you have copy and pasted and you forgot what it was, you can go look, and I really appreciate that. The only major miss on this phone that I've noticed versus the more flagship phones is that you don't have Samsung DeX. If you're not familiar with DeX, it allows you to essentially plug in your phone through an HDMI into a display and then use your phone as a kind of pared down desktop experience. It works pretty well, and I like it when I'm traveling because I can just bring my phone and an HDMI, and then my wife and I can watch pretty much whatever we want on the TV. But it's not a big deal that it doesn't have it to me, because really we also have a Fire Stick, and that's a better experience in general. Yeah, but overall the software is pretty good. Samsung's typical setup, and I like it. All right, let's talk a little bit about performance. This phone is using an Exynos chip, a mid-range Exynos chip that I think Samsung actually thought was going to be better than the Mediatek chip that they use in the A34. But in my experience, the A34 performs about the same, if not a little better in some scenarios, because I think most developers don't do any optimization for Exynos, but they will sometimes do optimization for Mediatek devices. So it seems to me that the Mediatek device is a lot better, the A34, especially because this chip tends to heat up a little bit more, the Exynos chip, whereas the Mediatek stays cool through everything. So I think long term for the battery, the hotter Exynos is going to make this phone run less long, essentially degrading the battery more quickly. But not only that, even if the battery wasn't being degraded, the excess heat that's being generated by the chip leads to worse battery life. So even though this phone has a smaller screen and the same size battery, I found that the battery life is actually significantly worse because the Exynos is not as well optimized. But that being said, the Exynos chip is still plenty fast for any of the games that you want to run, at least in my experience. I don't play the heaviest games. The heaviest game I play is Alien Isolation, which is essentially a port from a console game, but it looks really good on phones, and I think it's a pretty good stress test. If it can run this game, it can run pretty much anything. And I'll just show you how it runs here once it loads up. All right, there we go, we're loaded up. Ooh, a little bit of buffering. You can see now that it's loaded up, it's working all right. There are some stutters from time to time, but those usually go away after a little bit. But already I can feel on the back of my fingers that this phone is getting hotter. Whereas on my A34, I could play for a long time before noticing any heat buildup, really. So yeah, works all right. We'll get the job done. Might get a little bit hot. If you just play games like Candy Crush or like Plants vs. Zombies, or I don't know, whatever people play these days, this will work absolutely fine. And just for daily use, going through a browser, sending text messages, doing video calls, it'll work pretty well. But again, to me, the A34 performs just slightly better, and you know, the fact that it doesn't kick off any heat means that it's not going to get throttled, and the battery life is going to go longer day to day, and overall the degradation is going to be less. So I still think A34 is the move here. All right, enough on performance. Let's talk a little bit about the cameras. We've got the front camera, and then 3 back cameras, which are ultra wide, and then I think depth or macro. Here, let's see. Might have it just in here. Not macro, so it must be a depth sensor. Little lossless 2x zoom. I will throw a couple camera samples up so you can decide for yourself. What'd you build today?
Spackled some holes.
Some holes?
And put up 4 floating shelves and put up a mirror. And I'm about to build a console for my plants.
Wow.
Did you see our little
What'd you build today?
A snowman.
What?
A snowman.
No, you didn't.
Look at our photo.
Overall, I just can't really recommend this phone because the A34 exists. I think it's a much better bang for your buck. If the A34 didn't exist, then maybe I'd recommend this, because it's got a really good screen, good speaker setup, decent cameras, good software, decent haptics, pretty much checks all of the boxes for me, except for, as I said, the battery isn't the best because the chip gets hot, but it still will last longer than any of the Pixel phones. So, you know, it's a minor gripe. But overall, the A34 to me is just a way better deal. Anyways, if you end up getting this phone or the A34, please leave a comment letting me know how you liked it or why you decided to buy it. Or if you don't want to buy either of those phones, let me know what you'd pick instead. Anyways, I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for tuning in.